All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the start of our Medicare 101 training sessions. We have done this a number of times over the last couple of years, and Sandra and I kind of agree that there's so much that changes in Medicare each year that it's important to redo these. Number one, to help the new agents who are coming in, but number two, we want to have the most pertinent content available for playback too. So we will be recording these, and eventually we'll get these onto the YouTube channel so that you can access them and kind of go back and review things if you'd like to. I want to speak really quickly about if you're a brand new agent, you're obviously welcome to listen in on all of this. I've said this a number of times though, if you've started in the business in the last 6 months or so and you don't have past experience in Medicare, I'm a firm believer that you should get through one open enrollment period before you really start delving into Medicare. Um, my reasoning for that is because Medicare is fairly complex. There's a lot of information to know. There's a lot of regulatory oversight. There's a lot of certifications to be done, and just a lot of work to get done to even be able to sell. And so, if you're a new agent in your first, 6 to 12 months, I think personally that you should be focusing on really building a robust under 65 business, an under 65 practice. There's such a massive opportunity in that space right now, and that is going to be an exploding market come this fall. A lot of it is because of some of the carrier exits. So I think if you live in Indiana, everybody's aware that we've got CareSource pulling out of Indiana for 2026 in the under 65 space. Same thing in Ohio. We've got several other carriers that are shuffling things around. And I know there's going to be some volatility when it comes to rate increases and things like that. And so I just don't want you to think that there's not an opportunity in the under 65 space. I will tell you some of the top agents in our organization nationwide of the health markets ecosystem nationwide. Some of the top 10 agents don't do Medicare. Now, you're probably a little jaded if you've been with us for any period of time because we have done Medicare really, really well for a really, really long time. And so in our world, in our territory, it's hard to find anybody who doesn't do Medicare, especially after their first year in the business. But I do think there's value in understanding that under 65 space. A lot of people ask me where my Medicare clients come from, and a lot of them come from under 65 clients who are aging in and turning 65. So one of the ways you can build a really robust Medicare practice is to build a robust under 65 business. And so I just would encourage you, even if you're not going to do Medicare this fall, there still is probably value in sitting in on these trainings and watching them and absorbing them and beginning to immerse yourself in this business. Medicare is an extremely lucrative business. And as you well know, like I said, most of our agents and most of our top agents are involved in it. I just don't want you to think that you're missing an opportunity, though, if you're in your first 6 months and you decide not to do Medicare. Now, if you decide not to do Medicare this fall, that's okay. We are going to be doing another training and walking through this and probably using these recordings next spring to bring people into Medicare. So I think there's tremendous value in getting through your first open enrollment period and then doing training and certification the beginning of the next year for Medicare so you can start selling Medicare in 2027. And then obviously that would create an environment where twice in the 2027 calendar year you'd be going through the AHIP certification and obviously just learning more and more and more so that the next annual enrollment period for Medicare you're really in a great position to take advantage of that. Um, I would probably put the first time you go through Medicare training, you're probably going to have to put 20, 25, 30 hours into it between the AHIP certification and the carrier appointments and all of that. So I think that's, oftentimes for a new agent who needs cash, that's a step back because you're not spending that time driving revenue or driving, new clients in the under 65 space. So I just wanted to comment on that quickly and kind of set the stage for that. Does anybody have any questions about that at all? Cool. So I will just give you some credentials here. So one thing that's pretty cool is our Northern Indiana sales team, the team that's been a part of my organization for the longest. We have crushed Medicare for the last 15 to 18 years. I think we've been the number one Medicare team in the country, and so you are surrounded with a lot of high-powered Medicare agents. I think the last few years we've actually beat the number two team in the nation by 2 to 2.5 times their production. So we do this really, really well. And I think that's really interesting because most of us live in very rural markets, and we have collectively figured out how do we drill deep into these rural markets and how do we find a lot of Medicare clients. I will tell you it's a little bit different in Medicare because you can't just go out and actively solicit people for Medicare. There's a lot of marketing guidelines which we'll be working our way through over the next couple of weeks. You can't walk up to the group of elderly gentlemen with gray hair sitting at McDonald's drinking coffee in the morning and solicit them to sell a Medicare. Like that's just not legal, right? So you've got to figure out other ways to be able to find new clients. A lot of us have gone down the path of developing relationships with centers of influence. So financial planners are a big one, CPAs, attorneys, HR professionals. I think whether it's the under 65 space or the over 65 space, those are great relationships to begin building and cultivating. I've partnered with Gibson Insurance out of South Bend, Indiana for about 20 years now. And, they don't do Medicare or individual insurance. So there's just been a ton of business that has come our way. They have given me opportunities to get in front of large groups, and we have a number of large groups: the City of South Bend, the City of Mishawaka, Etamco, Farmer State Bank, um, Bethel College, who invite us in regularly, JACO, who invite us in regularly to do Medicare 101 presentations for their employees. Because as you think about it, a lot of employers would prefer that their employees not be on the group insurance and instead be in Medicare, right? That would be the preference. But an employer cannot push someone off of their group plan to go to Medicare. So what they can do is they can educate them, they can advise them. And I can't tell you how much new business I get off of doing these presentations for companies and doing them 2 or 3 times a year because people really do. It's the classic adage that if somebody puts you in front of a room and you're talking, somebody perceives you as the expert. But we get people calling in all the time, and we're like, "Where'd you hear about us?" And they're like, "Oh, we sat in one of your seminars at JACO a couple of years ago, and now we're ready to retire." So I do think as you start thinking about how do you grow your Medicare practice, it's obviously leads the traditional methods, but you can't do the same types of things that you can in the under 65 business. Under 65, you can walk into a business and solicit them. It's a little more difficult to do that for Medicare. So there are some nuances there, and I'd say if you're newer in the business, I think it would serve you well to begin to develop those center of influence relationships with the financial planners, the property and casualty agents, the HR professionals. I always struggled with that a little bit because I felt like HR professionals have large group insurance and I'm in the individual market. So is there even an opportunity for us to work together there? What I found over the years is there absolutely is because there's a lot of scraps that fall off of these large group plans, whether it's people who are retiring, people being laid off, people transitioning into a self-employed capacity, people turning 65, all of those opportunities. And HR professionals are actively looking for people like us to help guide them and help guide their employees. So I just push that out there that continuing to expand your influence, continuing to develop those relationships, continuing to build out your center of influence letter and actively staying in touch with those people, property and casualty agents, the farmers, the state farm, the farm bureaus, all those people, they don't do what we do. And so whether it's the under 65 or the Medicare space, those are wonderful relationships to continue to work on developing. So, Sandra, anything you want to add to that before we kind of move on? Okay. So we're going to spend the majority of today kind of working through the basics of Medicare. I'm actually going to be using a PowerPoint presentation today that I ran through compliance previously, and it's a PowerPoint presentation that I use a lot when I'm doing these educational events for employers because it's kind of just a high level overview of things. And so I'm going to kind of get things started. I'm going to work my way through that. In about a half hour or so, we're going to pivot over to Sandra. And Sandra is going to do a much deeper dive into what we call original Medicare, Medicare Part A, and Medicare Part B, and what exactly do they cover and what exactly do they not cover. And then I'll step back in after she's finished up and kind of walk through the rest of the comments that we have for today. So today's kind of that high level overview, hopefully just giving you, foundational information that you need to better understand exactly how Medicare works. So I'm going to share my screen here. Sandra, are you able to see my screen now?
Yep, I can.
Perfect. Duplicate this. So, all right. So what I did, just so you know, we have what's called our Protection for Life presentation, which we use as our positioning statement. Many of us do, maybe not everyone. I will say there are a couple of Protection for Life or P4L presentations by your sales leaders that are out there on the YouTube channel, specifically for the under 65 space. I'm a big believer, though, that this particular slide deck is really good And so I've taken bits and pieces from the protection for life. And one of those is like, who am I, right? So we're not going to spend much time on this, but you guys obviously know who I am and what I do. But I think obviously as you're moving into working with clients, it's really important for them to have some context on who you are, what your capabilities are, what your background, what your experience is. And for some of you, that doesn't have anything to do with insurance because you haven't been in the insurance game very long. But it's okay to tell your story a little bit and what led you here and why are you here and why do you see value in helping clients? So kind of building out your own personal story, I think is important. I always think it's also important to explain who Health Markets is and what our size and scale and capabilities really are. I always think about that. I don't know if you guys remember that old Verizon wireless commercial where it was a guy and then he's like, I got people behind me, and then all this team of people would appear behind him. That's kind of how I think about it when I'm explaining this to people, and giving them a little bit of idea of the organization that I'm affiliated with, how large Health Markets actually is. I let people know that we are one of the largest distribution channels in our space, servicing both the under 65 and the over 65 space. Obviously, our product portfolio is incredible. I believe we're pushing over 300 different insurance carriers that we represent on a national basis. So it gives us tremendous opportunity to find the right product for the clients that we actually serve. Navigating through the decision tree when it comes to purchasing insurance and specifically Medicare is confusing. I will tell you, I kind of joke about it that I don't care if somebody's low income, low resource, or high income, high net worth, or somewhere in between. As people approach age 65, everybody is equally confused about what the heck they're supposed to be doing. To me, that is where the opportunity exists for those of us who have the guidance and the counsel to give. And I do work with very intelligent, CEOs of companies that are retiring and they have no clue what's going on here. I work with directors in HR positions who have no idea how Medicare actually works. I really think that there's this gap in knowledge that creates this opportunity that we have. And so, as you think about helping a client, and I tell all of my clients, I'm going to pull different pieces from different places to custom design a solution for you today. Everything is going to be rooted in the idea, though, that we want it to be affordable today and we want it to stay affordable for the long haul. Because candidly, I don't care how good your insurance is. If you can't afford it, it doesn't really matter. And everybody usually nods in agreement on that. So I do like to touch on that a little bit. So everything that we do in the senior space is anchored in a good medical plan, whether that's a Medicare Advantage plan or a Medicare supplement plan with a drug plan. But all of those plans have gaps and holes in them. And so supplemental insurance is a way to kind of fill those gaps and holes. When we're thinking about the senior market, it may be a slightly different set of supplemental products that we're thinking about to fill the gaps and holes, whether it's a Medicare Advantage or a Medicare supplement plan. I will tell you personally, in the Medicare space, I gravitate towards probably three products, and many of our agents refer to this as the trifecta if they happen to sell all three. But the first one would be what's called our Advantage Guard product, which is kind of a supplement for a Medicare Advantage plan. It helps reimburse for the out-of-pocket copays and deductibles and things that they may incur on a Medicare Advantage plan. I'm also a fan of any form of cancer insurance. The majority of cancers are actually diagnosed in people ages 55 years and older. And so having a 20, 30, 40, $50,000 cancer policy, regardless of what other underlying coverage you have, I think is really important. And then our accident wise product. I really like our accident wise product for people in the senior market. Obviously, as people age, they become more and more concerned about accidents and falling. Sometimes people are more fearful about that than they are a heart attack or cancer, because one bad fall as an elderly person can obviously lead to a lot of ongoing issues, potentially hospitalizations, long-term care needs, help in their home, modifications to their home, their vehicles, those types of things. And so, getting them a lump sum cash infusion through an accident wise, whether it's 10, 15, $20,000 can be super beneficial. I would also say in this space, life insurance is oftentimes just a natural progression of the conversation, like it is in the under 65 space. And I think we'd be derelict if we did not recognize that and understand what we can do for seniors. Now, it's a little different type of product oftentimes that we're looking at for seniors, right? I would say many times these conversations skew more towards final expense type products, just to cremation and burial, just cleaning up the mess at the end. I do think it's worth noting, though, that in an appointment where you're talking about Medicare, you cannot legally quote or enroll people in life insurance. Now, you can ask some questions, you can do some fact finding, You can plant some seeds, but I believe there needs to be I think it's 48-hour window between when you're talking about Medicare and when you're talking about life insurance. So I think sometimes that's a stumbling block for people or agents because we never get back around to following up on the life insurance. But I will tell you, if you're going to build out a process and you're going to do this right, I really think that having that conversation about final expense life insurance or life insurance in general is probably a pretty important part of the process. So, did you raise your hand? Did you have a question there, Sandra?
Oh, no, I was scratching. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I saw you move and thought you were raising your hand on something. So I think this is a really nice visual that we use to really help a client understand right from the get-go that we're going to pull different pieces from different places to custom design a solution for you based on what you want, you need, you can afford. And that is opening the gates to the cross-sell opportunity, which candidly in the health market system, cross-selling is our secret sauce, right? You have an opportunity to make a tremendous income on under 65 health insurance and on all forms of Medicare benefits. But if you can figure out how to help clients self-identify other needs and understand the gaps and holes in all these coverages and cross-sell into these types of products that we've talked about, the Advantage Guard, the accident wise, the cancer, the life insurance, maybe long-term care insurance or short-term care insurance solutions, it just not only protects your client at a much higher level, but it also greatly enhances the income opportunity that you have. I think I've mentioned to many of you that our average agents last year in 2025 in our territory, the average agent made a little over $300,000, and that was up like 18% over the previous year. Right now, we're about 19% ahead of that after 6 months. And I think a lot of these income increases are really being driven by agents developing better and better processes and systems for cross-selling and helping those clients out at even a higher level. So I just want to make sure you guys are understanding that. Hopefully, that's going to be woven through everything that we talk about over the next couple of weeks. We are going to wrap up with our final session with Kevin McIntyre, who right now is the number one senior cross seller in the country, maybe for all of Golden Rule. They have over 80,000 brokers. And Kevin and I have actually been asked to fly out to do some video recordings of what Kevin's doing so that they can share it on a national scale. So we're going to bring the best of the best in on the last session, and Kevin's going to really talk through his process and what he does. It's not rocket science. It's just having a process, saying the right things at the right time in that process, and making sure that you don't shortchange things, that you're actually having the conversations and presenting the product. I promise you, clients will not purchase 100% of the products you do not show them, right? So a lot of this is just showing them, not selling them, just showing them. So, but this particular slide here, I think does a really good job of setting that up. And I think you've got to think about how can I leverage this slide as I'm working with clients to make sure that they understand that health insurance or a Medicare product by itself is not enough to protect you from financial ruin. And that's ultimately the story that I think we want to tell. So jumping into Medicare a little bit more, Medicare has been around a long time. It was first passed into law back in 1965, and beneficiaries began to sign up in 1966. Back in 2022, there are over 65 million Americans in the Medicare system, and it's continued to grow since then. They're estimating now that there's about 10 or 11,000 people turning 65 every single day. And over the next 6 years, that's going to double to more than 20,000 people a day turning 65. And then it's going to plateau for another decade. So if you're questioning whether or not this is the space that you want to be in as an agent, I would absolutely tell you it is. The opportunity is massive over the next 15 to 20 years in this particular space if you can find enough people who allow you to help them, right? I do think it's worth noting here, and I always say this in my employer group settings, that Medicare is distinctly different from Medicaid. A lot of times people use those two things interchangeably in air, but Medicare is a federal program administered by the federal government, and it's typically for people who are ages 65 years and older or people who are on disability. Medicaid is a state-based program that is primarily for lower income individuals. Now, there are many situations, and unfortunately more and more situations, where people are on Medicare and Medicaid. So they're what we refer to as dual eligible. So they're on Medicare because they're 65 or disabled. They're on Medicaid because they're very low income. And there are some uniquely different products that are available for people who are in that, we call it dual special needs, DSNP, DSNP is how you hear that pronounced a lot. So in that D-SNP population, and the insurance carriers, all of them have now built out products and are actively chasing that particular demographic because it's a combination of federal funds and state funds coming together, and oftentimes those people who are in that place they can qualify for a D-SNP Medicare Advantage plan, and oftentimes they have no copays, no cost share on virtually everything. Many times they have greatly enhanced, benefits from food cards to utility help, all kinds of assistance and help. And so if you're a person who wants to work in that more vulnerable market, and I would say vulnerable because I think those people really need help, maybe at a different level than people who aren't eligible for
I think
Medicare and Medicaid
I think we
together.
need to.
I'm
What
going to
else are we?
mute you here, Miguel. So if you care to work in that market, there are specific things that can be done. I think in 3 weeks, Sandra, you're going to work with Cheryl and Mariah are going to come in and just talk through it. Those two ladies have done an incredible job of immersing themselves in the dual special needs programs. And so they're going to talk through what that looks like. Obviously, there's been some changes over the last couple of years with the Medicaid programs. And so if you want to be in that space, that's something you can absolutely specialize in. And I do think um, there's a lot of benefit in working with people who are low income, low resource because they really do need the help sometimes more than our higher income, higher net worth individuals. So wanted to make that distinction there. As we mentioned, though, Medicare is a federal program. Typically, it's people who are ages 65 years and older, people with certain disabilities. So the way that works is if somebody becomes eligible for Social Security disability, typically after 24 months of being on Social Security disability, they're able to enter into the Medicare space. I do a lot of planning for people who have issues, and a lot of times people will come to me and they have a parent or a son or a daughter who may be disabled. Getting someone who is disabled or has a need for disability coverage into Social Security disability is really oftentimes a first step because there's a financial component to Social Security disability, but maybe even more important than the financial component is the ability after 24 months of being on that to get into the Medicare system and gain access to, pretty significant health benefits through that. And then people with ESRD, you'll see ESRD, you'll hear more about this as you go through Medicare trainings. ESRD stands for end stage renal disease. And so those are typically people who are in kidney dialysis. And that means their kidneys are failing and they're having to go in for dialysis a couple times a week potentially. So people who have ESRD do have a lot of additional protections and a lot of additional options to get into Medicare in different ways. There are some complexities around that, but it's just worth mentioning because you will see that kind of sprinkled throughout our presentation over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, this red, white, and blue card is what a Medicare card actually looks like. When someone gains access to Medicare, they get assigned a Medicare number. Weirdly, this number used to be their Social Security number with an A after it. They changed that a number of years ago to a completely randomized number, which was really smart so that all these seniors aren't running around with waving their Social Security numbers around. And then most people have their Medicare Part A and their Medicare Part B, and it is possible to have different effective dates in Part A and Part B too. Or it's possible to be enrolled in Part A and not Part B. Sometimes you'll see that. We'll kind of talk through the nuances of that. But obviously, this is kind of all the information that we would need. I'll tell you, when I begin working with a Medicare beneficiary who wants my help, one of the first things we ask for is a copy of their Medicare card, because this is going to give me a lot of information that I need for application purposes. It also helps me understand when did Part A start, when did Part B start, and then what kind of dominoes do we need to set up to fall to get them into the appropriate programs. So typically people become eligible to receive their Medicare benefits on the first day of the month that they turn 65. Now, I will say there's one caveat to that. If you or your client, if your birthday is the first day of the month, then your Medicare eligibility date is the first day of the previous month. So if my birthday was September 1st and I was turning 65 on September 1st, I'd actually become eligible for Medicare on August 1st. So that's that one caveat. Everybody else, if I'm turning 65 on September 15th, September 1st is my first day of eligibility. So it's usually the first day of the month that you're turning 65. We talked about 24 months after you become eligible for Social Security. We also talked about several other unique circumstances like ESRD. So there are two main foundational pillars to Medicare. And whether I'm doing this in a group setting for an employer or I'm talking to a client who's coming in for the first time, this is kind of oftentimes where we start really talking about Medicare. The two foundational pillars of Medicare are Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B. Medicare Part A is your hospitalization coverage. Medicare Part B is your medical insurance, or as I refer to it, outpatient services. If you think about it, Part A is going to cover you inpatient in a hospital setting. Part B is going to cover outpatient services like doctor's visits, tests, therapy, things like that. Sandra's going to go a little bit more in depth into that in a moment. Just very generically speaking, Medicare Part A, as long as someone has worked in the US and paid into the system for at least 40 quarters or 10 years, they get Medicare Part A at no cost, $0. And that's typically what you're going to see with the clients you serve is that Part A is not going to cost them anything. Medicare Part B does have a premium attached to it, and it's a premium that slightly increases every once in a while. Every year, the government decides if they're going to raise it a little bit. I've seen it stay flat a few years. For this year, though, it's the Medicare Part B premium is 202.90. So $202.90 a month is what a consumer pays. Most consumers pay. Now, I will put a couple of caveats on that. First of all, if someone is dual eligible and they have Medicare and Medicaid, it's very possible that Medicaid might pay that 202.90 for them. So you will run into some situations where people are like, I'm not paying anything for Part B. That probably means they're low income and that the state is paying their Medicare Part B premium for them. The other thing to understand is that Medicare Part B, if someone is taking Social Security benefits, it's probably getting sucked out of their Social Security check each month. So I've also had people say, "Oh, I don't pay anything for Medicare Part B." I'm like, "Well, you do. It's just buried in your Social Security check and you didn't know it was coming out of there." So sometimes when people say that, it's not the Medicaid's paying for it, it's just that it's getting pulled out before they get their Social Security check and they've forgotten or didn't know that that was actually getting sucked out of their Social Security check. One other thing that I think is important, and I tell clients this because when you think about providing hospitalization coverage and outpatient services for somebody over age 65, would you agree it probably costs more than $202.90 a month? It does. And I think it's important for us to understand this. And oftentimes I share this with clients that when you become eligible for Medicare, the government starts earmarking between $1,500 and $1,700 a month per person for your care. And that money comes out of the Medicare trust fund that each one of us are paying into our entire working lifetimes. So behind the scenes, there's kind of this back end subsidy. The consumer never sees this, but it is paid from the Medicare trust fund into the Medicare system to help fund the benefits. So I say 15 to 1700 because it depends on what part of the country you're in as to what that reimbursement actually is or what that amount actually is that gets pulled out. But that's generically where it is. Obviously, your client is then adding another, call it $200 a month for their Medicare Part B. So just their Medicare Part A and Part B, they're probably pushing $1,800 to $1,900 a month in actual premium that is being paid into the system on their behalf. So this is why Medicare is really good and it works really well because you should be able to get pretty dang good insurance for close to $2,000 a month per person, right? Um, I will tell you there's a new push. This happened a couple of years ago, but there's a new push from many of the Democrats today talking about Medicare for all. I will tell you, I think that is absolute craziness personally, because if you think about it, Medicare does work really well. And the idea of expanding it to everybody is a really nice idea. But what I always go back to is what's the funding mechanism on that? Who's going to pay for it, right? If it costs $2,000 a month to have somebody in Medicare plus what the consumer's paying above and beyond that, how would we fund that? The way that gets funded is by people paying into the system from the time they start working in their early 20s to the time they retire at 65. So they've paid in massive amounts of money, which actually can fund that. If you took my family of five and said, hey, we're going to put you into Medicare, we're probably looking at close to $10,000 a month in premium for my family of five to have Medicare-like benefits. Well, I haven't paid into the system long enough for that to actually happen. And so I'm a big believer when you hear a politician talk about Medicare for all, they don't understand numbers. They don't understand the math behind it. And they're talking about things that, in my opinion, are very socialist in nature. I'm not a fan of that. I don't think that's ever going to work. And so when you hear politicians talking about it, that's at least my take on it. You all might have different opinions, and that's okay. Um, so these are kind of the two main components of Medicare. Oh, one other thing I want to mention is that some people have a Medicare Part B premium that is far more than $202.90 a month. There is something called income related monthly adjustment amount, or IRMA. And this is one of the reasons why when I start working with a new Medicare client, part of my information gathering or my fact finding is to understand what their income has been in recent years. Because if a couple has had income over, I think it's 218,000, there's a really good chance that they're going to get hit with an income related monthly adjustment amount and that Medicare is going to charge them a higher premium for their Medicare Part B and their Medicare Part D, which is their drug plan. Um, and it depends on how high over that $218,000 threshold they actually are. I have clients who are paying close to $600 a month per person for just their Medicare Part B. On the flip side of it, I don't feel too sorry for them because that means their annual income is over $750,000. So they probably can't afford it. But wealthy people will struggle with this and wealthy people will have questions about this. And I think it's something we need to address with them because if you tell them it's going to be 202.90 and all of a sudden they get an invoice from Medicare and it's $600 a month, you're going to have some explaining to do. So I think it's really, really important to get an idea of where people's income are so you can prepare them for that income related monthly adjustment amount. We're going to go into IRMA a little bit more. I think that's in week 4, maybe, where I'm going to show you guys the thresholds. We'll kind of talk through what IRMA looks like a little bit more. There's actually some great resources online where you can go in and talk to a client and show them what the numbers are. I will just say very quickly, the way it works is that the government looks at your tax return from 2 years previous to determine whether or not they're going to hit you with IRMA. So for 2026, the government is looking at people's 2024 tax return to determine whether they're going to hit them with an upcharge for 2026. And that kind of makes sense. People are like, why do they go 2 years back? Well, it kind of makes sense because they have to figure out whether or not they're going to assess an IRMA in January of 2026. Well, nobody's filed their 2025 tax return yet. So the most recent tax return they have to work off of is their 2025 tax return, right? Now, I will say one of the situations we deal with a lot is that people at age 63 and 64, that was their highest wage earning years of their life, and maybe they were making three, four, $500,000 during that time, and now they're coming to us because they're retiring and they're leaving their job, and their income is going to drop down to retirement income. There's actually an appeal form that you can print from the website or send it to them. The client can appeal that income related monthly adjustment amount if their current situation is not what the government is seeing from 2 years ago. So again, that's another service that we can offer, especially to our higher income, higher net worth clients that can save them a ton of money if they just know the process and we help guide them through that. So I did want to mention that while we're on talking about Part B here. Um, Sandra, I think I'm going to pause here before I go into the rest of it. I'll say one last thing here. So when someone has Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B, what they have is about 80% coverage on medical. So this is where we come in as agents. What we have to do is we have to help them fill those gaps. And the two gaps that we need to fill are we have to cover the 20% that is not covered by Medicare because if they don't do anything, that's unlimited coverage. So they have a $100,000 open heart surgery, they have the potential of around $20,000 of out-of-pocket cost. $1 million cancer claim, they could go up to $200,000. So I tell my clients, one gap and hole that I need to fill for you is we've got to put a cap on that 20%. Or eliminate it. We can, in some situations, almost completely eliminate it or at least put a cap on it so it's not unlimited exposure to you. And then the other thing that A and B do not cover is outpatient drugs. So that's where Part D comes in as drug coverage, and we need to help them get enrolled in a Part D prescription drug plan as well. So those are the two areas where we've got to help. We got to fill the gaps. We got to cover the 20%. We got to help them with their drug coverage. So Sandra, I'm going to stop here and back out of this, and I'm going to, if you could maybe share and move into your presentation. I know you're going to
I,
take a little bit of time and do a deeper dive on Medicare Part A and Part B and exactly what they cover.
yep, I do. Yep. And if, can I share my screen?
I think you'll need to try to share, and then I'll have to approve it.
Okay. And, let me, hold on one second. So there was a question in the chat. So if Irma is hit on the Part B, and then their income just slowly decreases, will it be adjusted downward? Would the Part B premium be adjusted downward? And again, they are basing that it can be adjusted downward based on their reported household income.
So that would happen at the
Sometimes,
beginning of
yep,
the year. That would
yeah,
be happen at the beginning of the year. They reassess it every year. So if someone doesn't file for an appeal, or if their income is high and then it goes down, if they do nothing, eventually it'll catch up and the government will fix it. It's just that they could may pay a year or two of enhanced premiums
hmm
without
yeah.
needing to if they didn't appeal it.
Yeah, I actually had a client who they couldn't figure out why their Part B premiums were so high, and they had retired. It's been a few years now. Their income wasn't where it was reported, and I think at that point they were paying almost $500 a month for each person's Part B premium. They said, "Why is it so high?" I said, "We had this conversation about what their income was. What did they report in their tax return last year, the previous year?" And it sometimes Social Security is the gatekeeper, right? They're the ones charging that. And it didn't get caught in the system. So they had to be proactive about contacting Social Security and asking them to recalibrate their Part B premiums. So just again, it's providing that education and counsel to your clients. So, okay, I can share now.
Perfect.
All righty. Bear with me while I get things set up. All righty. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, we can. It looks good.
All right. So like Silas said, and I love Medicare. It's like I really do love Medicare. Part A and Part B really are the foundation of Medicare coverage, like Silas was saying. I would like you guys to understand a little bit more in depth about why it's so important to make sure we're talking about filling the gaps of Medicare and how it really works. I don't know about you, but I've run into people where all they had was the red, white, and blue card. And they didn't even understand how it worked. So, Part A is there for hospital treatment stays. And it really is there basically to cover the expense of the room, bed, and meals, nothing medical. And most people think, oh, if I've got Part A, it's going to cover all my expenses in the hospital. Well, not really. It doesn't cover the physicians, it doesn't cover the prescriptions. And I always tell them, you know what? You're going to want Part B because you're going to want anesthesia for that procedure. So it's really there to just cover some of the room, bed, and meal expenses. It does cover hospice care, home health care, and skilled nursing care for rehab purposes only. Anybody know if somebody has been in the hospital and then had to go to a rehab facility? So there's some rules behind this. The only time that Medicare will cover the hospital stay is, not the hospital stay, but the rehab stay is after they've had an inpatient treatment stay for 3 days. Part A does not cover hospital observation stays. If somebody goes into the ER and they're not quite sure, maybe they're having chest pains, they're not quite sure what's going on, so they're going to admit them for observation. The Part A doesn't cover that. It doesn't cover the medical services, like I said. It doesn't cover long-term care, doesn't cover basic vision, dental, or prescriptions. And like Silas said, it's usually free. If somebody's worked 40 quarters or 10 years. They've paid into the system, so there's no additional premium. There are folks that can sign up for Part A that haven't quite met the 40 quarters. You may have run into somebody like that. And there is a premium charge. And Silas, you're right, it's over $500 a month just for Part A. Part A, like I said, it's inpatient stays and there are costs to it. And when I just throw this up here, I don't want you to memorize this because these costs actually change over time. But basically, when somebody's in the hospital for 1 day or up to 60 continuous days, they actually have a deductible and it's $1,736, whether you're in 1 day or up to 60 days. If all I had is Part A, I'm in the hospital, my hospital stay portion is going to be $1,736. And let's say I'm admitted for that heart condition, right? So I'm there for maybe 3 or 4 days, and then I move to a rehab facility. Well, my hospital for that room stay is $1,736. Let's say I recovered from the heart issue. 3 months later, I fall, I break a hip, and I need major surgery, and I'm in the hospital again. Well, now that's a new occurrence. Even though it was 3 months later and I've already had a hospital and I've already paid this deductible, I've got another occurrence, different diagnosis, another 1736. You can see, and guys know I come from a medical background. We've had patients in the hospital 3, 4 months. So after day 60, after 3 months, 2 months, it's a $434 copay per day. After 3 months of being continuously in the hospital, it's $868 per day. And after day 150, there are no more days in a hospital that Medicare will cover. That's it. You have 150 lifetime days. Sound like a bargain? You've worked, you paid into the system, and that's what you're getting. But remember, I've also said Part A will help cover skilled nursing care. That's after you've been admitted to the hospital for inpatient treatment, and it's a 3-day hospital stay. And Medicare will cover the first 20 days at no additional cost. And then as you're making progress, but it's not quite fast enough, then if you're in, you can stay up to day 100, but now you have a copay per day. And then after day 100, you're not making any progress. You're still considered in this skilled nursing care. Now at that point, they're considering you in custodial care. So any questions around Part A? Again, I just share these actual cost and figures to you because if all you had was Medicare, this is what you're potentially at risk for.
And you will have
So,
clients who say, I just want to run with Medicare Part A and Part B. And I think it's important for us to understand where the gaps and holes are so we can advise them against that.
Kemp, you're asking what's the break and stay for it to be a new stay? It's based on the diagnosis. So if I'm in there and let's say, for that heart condition, and I come out, and even if it's like 2 weeks later, if I fall and break a hip, I'm back in the hospital. That's a new stay. But let's say I've recovered from that initial heart situation. And then I don't know, later on, I start to have complications again with that heart situation. Then that is not a new stay. They will not be charged a new deductible. Okay, so think of it by diagnosis. Okay,
One other
good
thing I'll just
question.
mention here, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in coming weeks, but that whole skilled nursing thing is a really big deal because many people believe and expect that Medicare is going to cover nursing home, assisted living, and in-home healthcare, and it was never priced or designed to do that. It will cover up to 100 days in a skilled nursing facility following a 2+ day hospitalization, um, but only if the patient is getting better and making progress. So these are really some of the most tough situations I've dealt with clients and their families, where mom goes in, breaks her hip. She's in the hospital for 3 or 4 days with a hip replacement. She can't go home, so they send her into a skilled nursing facility. The Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplement plan is expected to cover that only for up to 100 days as long as she's making progress. So I've had multiple situations. We had an internal family situation where my wife's grandmother was in and she was coming up on 90 days in the nursing home and we were having to make some really quick tough decisions on what were we going to do because after 100 days if she had to stay in that nursing home, we were going to have to start funding the cost of that because Medicare was done. The other scenario that we've run into a number of times is that somebody will be put in that nursing home and then there for 4 or 5, 6 days and they're not doing their PT, they're not getting better, they're just laying in a bed. Well, at that point, the Medicare supplement or the Medicare Advantage plan may cut off payment. And that's a really tough situation. I've had families very upset with me and the insurance company saying they're kicking mom out of the nursing home. And I'm like, actually, they're not kicking her out. They're just saying they're not going to pay the bill anymore because she's not making progress. And this is not, that's not what Medicare was priced or designed to do, is just cover somebody just laying in a bed in a nursing home. They've got to be making progress and getting better. So it's important to understand some of those things. And I think that also substantiates the need to have the conversation around long-term care insurance, short-term care insurance. There are other forms of insurance that are built to cover that. Unfortunately, though, many people are not willing or able to pay the premium when they're healthy to prepare for that eventuality when they're sick. And you can't buy it after you need it either. So I really do push my clients around, once we get their Medicare taken care of, let's have that conversation around long-term care. And let's talk about what your plan is for this while you still have a choice to make. Because eventually the choice is no longer yours. Once you develop too many health conditions, the answer is just no, you can't buy additional long-term care, short-term care, hybrid type coverages. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the coming weeks too, but I just kind of wanted to set that stage that, Medicare is not priced or designed to cover nursing home, assisted living, or in-home health care, except in this one little situation.
Yeah. And then, Kate, you asked if the 100 days for skilled care is a lifetime thing. No, that's just based on the rehab, if rehab is needed. And please know that all these costs are projected to increase. Okay.
Kemp has a question. What's your question,
Oh,
Kemp?
yeah. What's your question?
Okay, thank you. Sandra, can you re-clarify? Someone has a heart attack, they're in the
Mhm.
hospital, they're there for 90 days or whatever.
Mhm.
They leave, they have a second heart attack. Is there a break where then it's recovered? 60 days, 90 days, a year, never to
Is
where
there a
is there a break where they're out of the hospital, they're healthy, they go back in for the same type of illness? Is it like a 60-day break where it resets and then now it's another $1,736? Are you saying once they're in for something, that's a lifetime use of that issue?
No, that's not a lifetime use of the issue. So, if they, so in your situation where they're again having another heart attack, it's still a cardiac issue, right? It may not be, as a complication of the first heart attack, but there's another heart attack. It's the cardiac. And so again, I'm not the one coding it or how it's being diagnosed, right? But if it's related to the first condition, then it's not going to be a new occurrence.
Well, and I do think there's a benefit period. Like if you've been out of the hospital or the skilled nursing facility for 60 consecutive days, I
Yeah,
think that does reset their
that
benefit
Oh,
period.
reset.
oh yeah, I thought you were talking about the regular hospital.
No, that's what I was asking. So it's 60 days. Okay.
Yes.
60 days on the skilled
Okay.
care. Yeah.
And
Thank
that's
you.
hospital too. So hospital or skilled nursing, if it resets after 60 consecutive days being out of the hospital or the nursing facility.
Yeah. So, so isn't that nice, when people kind of, when they, maybe hear about the actual, like, how does it really work? This is how it really works. And they've paid into the system, but there's unlimited out of pocket expenses, as you can see. So our jobs are very important when it comes to the Medicare side of things. So then we have Medicare Part B. There's usually a premium, right? It is considered optional because some people might delay taking the Part B if they have creditable coverage elsewhere, such as through a group employer or their spouse's group employer. But it's there to cover your lab work, test, x-rays, physicians, specialists, PTOT speech, even durable medical equipment like wheelchairs and walkers. It does not cover, again, the long-term care, vision, dental, and prescriptions. Now, I'm going to stop right here for a moment because with vision, for example, if you have glaucoma or cataracts, well, that's a vision problem, right? Well, those are considered medical conditions. And so, yes, those would be under the Medicare Part B medical. But if you're just going for routine vision check, eyeglasses, routine cleaning and dental, those are not covered. And prescriptions that you get at the pharmacy. And like I said, there's usually a monthly premium. Right now, it is the 202.90. It can be higher for higher income folks. We don't really love Irma. I call her Irma, but she is a real person, real cost. Medicare Part B does have an annual medical deductible of $283 this year. And then Medicare, if I had Part B, Medicare will cover 80% of the cost, and then you get to pay 20%. If you do end up running into a provider that doesn't accept Medicare assigned cost for their services, that provider wants to charge even more above the Medicare assigned cost, Medicare is still going to cover 80% of the assigned cost, but that doctor still wants the remaining balance, right? Well, that doctor can't charge the beneficiary the full remaining balance. They can only charge them 15%. There are projections that these premiums are going to be going up anywhere to 209.50 up to 221, according to Kaiser. And then the Part B deductible is estimated to go up to $310 next year. But we will have firm confirmation about those increases probably closer to October. And again, there's unlimited out-of-pocket expenses because there's no cap on what that 20% could be. So it's a real number. My husband had a hip replacement, and the actual total bill was about $100,000 for one hip. So yeah, that's something that's covered by Medicare. And if all he had was Medicare Part A and B, we're basically looking at whatever the cost was for the hospital stay, and then 20% of the medical procedure. And then if he needed the second one done, we're looking at another 20%. So easily, that could be $20,000 to $40,000, right? That's just for two hips. And that's pretty much how Part B works. Any questions about Part B? No? Good. All right. So Part A and Part B, basically, so that's, like I said, that's the foundation. Medicare directly provides the benefit coverage if all you had is Medicare Part A and B. So it's not an insurance company helping to pay that 80%, right? With original Medicare, there's no networks to worry about. You do have your choice of doctors, hospitals, and other providers for services. And again, Medicare pays about 80% of your medical cost, and you're responsible for 20%. Unfortunately, there's no set yearly maximum out-of-pocket cost. So our jobs are important. There are options to fill the gaps. One option, as you may have studied in your materials or you're familiar with, are Medicare supplement plans, or they're also called Medigap plans. There are Medicare Part D prescription drug plans to help fill those expenses. And then they also have the option of Medicare Advantage plans, also known as Part C. So I don't know if you can kind of see that we're all in the alphabet here: Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, and then Medicare supplements. I really like this page, and this is actually in each beneficiary gets this Medicare and You handbook. I call it the Medicare Bible, but it really does a nice outline of, okay, you're in Medicare now. Now you get to choose how you want to fill the gaps for those unlimited out-of-pocket expenses. And how do you fill the gaps for prescription coverage? And you'll see on one side, on the left side, you can stay with original Medicare to be your primary insurer. And then you'll decide what type of standalone prescription drug plan will meet your needs. Those are basic foundation is designed by Medicare for those benefits. They contract with the insurance companies to offer them to the beneficiaries. So again, knowing what their prescriptions are helps us to assess and make a recommendation what's the most appropriate Part D plan for that person. And then they can enroll in a Medicare supplement policy to fill the 20% and the hospital co-expenses. So again, that side of the fence, you have higher premiums, but it gives you the flexibility to see any doctor, any hospital without having to worry about networks. Okay. But again, there's a cost factor, pros and cons to both sides. On the other side, you have Medicare Advantage. And they've got a lot of people that like that. And what that is it's actually replacing original Medicare as being your primary insurance. Medicare Advantage plans are offered by insurance companies. And so it's you and the insurance company paying for the benefits. They do incorporate a lot of extra benefits as well as prescription coverage. So it's like having your Happy Meal. It's one price for all your benefits. Okay. And again, it does rely on networks. So we want to know who their physicians are, who their specialists are, what are their prescriptions. We want to make sure we're making the most appropriate recommendation to help cover their needs. with Medigap policies. I know this is a fun chart to look at. Again, we got more alphabet soup. The Medicare supplement plans are designed by Medicare. The most comprehensive plan that we can offer somebody new coming into Medicare right now is what we call Plan G. As you can see here on the left side, it shows you what those co-pays and deductibles are and how your Plan G will cover everything except for the Part B deductible, which is for this year $283 for the year. Not bad for an annual medical deductible, especially when somebody might be coming off of a plan that has a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 deductible. And we'll be going more into detail about that. So they add in a drug plan, and they have Part A and B, and then the Part D. Part D is for the drugs. There's usually a monthly premium for Part D. And you share the cost of your prescriptions with your insurance company. Again, there's a lot of details. We'll be having a special session actually next week, right? We're talking about Part D. So I won't go into the details for that. But they are run by the insurance carriers, and plans vary in cost and the drugs that they cover. And please know that even if you have a person who's new to Medicare and they're not taking any medications, I highly encourage them to enroll in a drug coverage plan. If they're going with a Medicare supplement policy, they want a standalone drug plan. Because if they don't enroll when they're first eligible, and then later on they want to, they're going to incur a late enrollment penalty, and that is a lifetime penalty. It gets tacked on to whatever the premium is, and it does not go away. Oh, and another fun fact, for those higher income households, there's also an IRMA charge for Part D. So it's good to know that too, and we'll be talking about that in one of our other sessions. But so we're filling the gaps. Now to replace the Medicare, okay, we're going to look at a Medicare Advantage plan. And again, these are approved by Medicare. They're run by the insurance companies. They use a network of doctors and hospitals and including facilities. I would say that the biggest challenge some people have is related to the rehab stays, where they want to go to maybe a particular rehab facility, but that rehab facility might not be in their network. Okay, what's going on? Some Medicare Advantage plans may have a small monthly premium, but I think you guys have seen most of the plans being advertised as a zero or low cost. So the low cost just means they may have some additional benefits that they're offering above and beyond what the base of that Medicare Advantage plan is offering. The $0 premium just means they're not paying anything above and beyond their Part B premium. I always have, do you ever have people ask, why is it zero? It's not free.
Right. And I think I got to always remind them that there's that $1,500 to $1,700 stipend kind of behind the scenes that the government's paying in. So, and I'll go into a little bit more depth in that in a moment here too.
Yeah. And then the nice thing about these Medicare Advantage plans, though, especially for our folks who are new to Medicare because of their disability, they're under the age of 65. The Medicare Advantage plan is going to be a great option for them because it is going to cap their out-of-pocket expenses. And again, they may offer some additional coverage like dental, vision, hearing aids, fitness. How many people have heard of silver sneakers? Yeah, I want that plan with silver sneakers. But the rules do vary by plan. So again, our job as insurance advisors, insurance agents, or brokers, we need to make sure we're educating them. So I did this little side-by-side comparison here, just so that you can see. And then with Medicare supplement plans, it works with original Medicare Part A and B. It does not cover prescriptions. You do need to have that separate Part D plan. There are no networks, so you can see any provider across the US. You have hospital, medical, and RX costs covered by Medicare, the insurance company, and then you. So you got three entities paying the bills. It does not cover basic dental, vision, and hearing, but carriers may offer some discount programs we're starting to see on those supplement plans, or they may offer a fitness benefit. So it's nice to know they're looking at maybe some of these other types of preventive services that are outside of the scope of medical. The costs are usually higher in premium, but you may not have any copays or deductibles to pay. On the Medicare Advantage side, this takes the place of original Medicare, Part A and B, and many also take the place of the Part D. They incorporate that rate in there. Like I said, it's kind of like getting your Happy Meal, your sandwich, fries, and drinks all in one plan. They do use a network of providers. Your hospital and medical and prescription costs are covered by the insurance company and you. Medicare's not paying. And you may have additional services and benefits that are also incorporated into your plan, like dental, vision, hearing, and fitness. The cost is usually a zero or low monthly premium in addition to the Part B premium that they're paying. And the plans include a cap on your max out-of-pocket expenses. So I think that's pretty much all I had to share for that, Silas.
Perfect. Well, thank you for going through that.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm gonna go through a few things and just maybe say them in my own voice a little bit, just to kind of hopefully reinforce some of this. So I'm gonna go ahead and share again here. Um, and Sandra did a really nice job of kind of walking through what it looks like, to fill the gaps. And I really try to just, explain to my clients that there are two paths that they can travel down, to fill the gaps. The first path is obviously to take their Medicare Part A, their Medicare Part B, pick up the Medicare supplement and the Part D prescription drug plan. The other option is to use the Medicare Advantage plan. And you would reference this particular chart. I use this chart very regularly as well. A version of this is in the Medicare and You book that you had mentioned, which comes out every single year. There's also a CMS publication that's out there called Choosing a Medigap Policy. And this particular one is from an older version of that. I've always liked this one the best, just kind of how this flows. And so I actually print this page off and I use this as a visual aid for the clients when they come in and sit down with me. I'll lay it down. I'm like, you're welcome to take notes on this, but we're going to use this flow chart to kind of walk you through the different options that are available to you. So I first go through with a client what this first path looks like, and I call this the old school path. This is the path that has existed for many, many years. And in this path, you're enrolled in your Medicare Part A and Part B, and the federal government is internally administering 80% of your benefits and paying your claims through Medicare Part A and Part B. And then you're buying private insurance from private insurance companies to fill the two gaps and holes that you have. I kind of walk through this. I tell clients Medicare Part A is zero, Medicare Part B is 202.90 for most people. Prescription drug plans range from $0 to $125 a month in most markets. I tell clients, I don't want you to figure this out on your own. I don't think this should be a guessing game. We have software which we use, which is called Connecture, where I can plug in all your medications and I can rank order them. And and identify for you which drug plan is going to feel very comfortable. But it is our policy to cover the 20%. Today, the most popular Medicare supplement plan is what's called a Plan G. And a Plan G is around $200 a month for a person aging into age 65. Some carriers are a little lower, some might be a little higher. Geography matters. But I tell people it's going to cost about $200 a month to get into a Medicare supplement Plan G. What a Medicare supplement Plan G does is it covers all of the 20% that's not covered up here, except for the Medicare Part B deductible, which right now is $283. So if we were to put a client into a Medicare supplement plan G, they would have a $283 deductible and 100% coverage after that. So that's pretty incredible coverage when it's all said and done. But they are paying an enhanced premium for that, right? So they're paying their Medicare Part B premium. Even if they're in a $0 Part D plan, they're paying, call it another $200 a month for their Medicare supplement. So, they're probably pushing over $400 a month per person in premium to have that incredible coverage. Now, this particular path, I will tell you, no, I've never run into a consumer who is unhappy with the coverage on this path, right? $283 deductible, 100% coverage after that, no network restrictions. You can go anywhere in the country that accepts Medicare. Um, Doctors like patients being on this plan because of a couple of things. Number one, they really have to talk to the patient about money because the client doesn't owe much money, right? It's all being billed, to Medicare or to the insurance company. And number two, one of the upsides and downsides to this particular path is that the government is not super effective and efficient at administering insurance benefits. So at this point, there's not a lot of pre-authorization, pre-certification, or checks and balances in place to prevent the fraud, waste, and abuse that we know is rampant in the system right now. So doctors kind of like this path because they can just bill whatever the heck they want and they get paid. There's not a lot of questions. So you will occasionally run into people who say, "Well, my doctor said I need to be on a Medicare supplement plan." I'm like, "That's great if you're willing to pay for it and if you can afford it." And more importantly than just affording the initial premium, probably the second piece of that is, can you afford the rate increases? I will tell you, 5 years ago, if I was talking to a client and they asked what kind of rate increases we were looking at on Medicare supplement plans, I would have told them single digit increases. 6 to 9% was kind of the average as far as the rate increases are concerned. I will tell you over the last 18 to 24 months, many of our clients on Medicare supplement plans have been seeing 18 to 24% annual rate increases.
Yeah. I had somebody that had like a 34% increase.
So I think we've got to broach that subject with our clients is that if you think 400 is affordable up front, please understand that that could go up easily by $50 next year and then continue to climb. And one of the things that I'm always thoughtful about is how long are you going to be on Medicare? And I'll ask that question. And people are like, "Oh, hope 25 or 30 years." I'm like, exactly. If you're adding 20 or 25% rate increases on top of each other over a 20 or 25-year time frame, it becomes really, really expensive later in life to stay on that particular path. So if somebody can afford it, if somebody says, "Hey, I just want the easy button, money doesn't matter. I want to be able to go anywhere that I want," a Medicare supplement plan is a wonderful solution for them. But it is going to be the most expensive, and you are going to see pretty significant rate increases on it. One other caveat that I think is important, and I've started asking my clients about this year, is specifically regarding the Mayo Clinic. So for many years, the Mayo Clinic accepted all forms of insurance. But starting in 2026, they made a change and they said, "We're only going to accept certain forms of insurance. And in Medicare, we're only going to accept Medicare supplements. We're not going to accept Medicare Advantage plans." So I broached this subject with my clients right out of the gate. I'm like, "Is Mayo important to you? If you were sick, you need to go to Mayo." And some people are like, "Yeah, absolutely. I want access to Mayo." I'm like, "Well, you have no choice then to go down this particular path if Mayo is really that important to you." I have a lot of other clients who are like, "Meh, it'd be nice to have it, but Cleveland Clinic's just as good, and Cleveland Clinic still accepts, Medicare Advantage plans, and a lot of other places accept Medicare Advantage plans." So I do have that conversation with them. This particular path is the most expensive, but when it comes to usage and coverage and it being an easy button, it's wonderful. But I also oftentimes use the adage that everybody doesn't drive a Mercedes-Benz or a Bentley for a reason, right? Not everybody can afford to do that up front or let alone deal with those kinds of rate increases. So I do like to explain this particular path. And the biggest thing I think you've got to understand is that the government is internally administering 80% of the benefits, and then you're buying private insurance from private insurance companies to fill the gaps. So about 23 years ago, I think now, somebody in the government looked at this. Yeah, go ahead, Sandra.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I put in the chat a link to the Medicare New 2026 handbook and a link to the Choosing a Medigap policy for you.
Perfect. Thank you. So about 23 years ago, somebody in the government looked at this first path, the old school path, and they recognized that maybe the government is not super effective and efficient at administering insurance benefits. And that was the catalyst to pass legislation which created the secondary path for consumers to travel down, which is now referred to as Medicare Advantage. If you go with the Medicare Advantage plan, You're still in Medicare, you still have all the rights and protections of Medicare, and you still have to pay that Medicare Part B premium, whatever it is, whether it's the base amount or the base amount plus IRMA. So you're going to pay that Medicare Part B premium no matter what. But if you choose a Medicare Advantage plan, what the consumer is effectively doing is they are instructing the government to subcontract the administration of the benefits out to a private insurance company of their choice. And they can choose, Priority Health, Humana, United Healthcare, Aetna, Devoted Health. There's a lot of carriers out there that are playing in this particular game. And so if you think about it, it's kind of like the privatization of Medicare. It's the government saying instead of administering these benefits in-house, we're instead going to pay that $1,500 to $1,700 a month to the insurance company, and the insurance company then becomes responsible for paying all the claims, processing everything, doing all the work. So it's the government subcontracting it out to a private insurance company. When this originally started, the idea behind it was that a private insurance company, with their systems and processes and infrastructure and networks, they could take the same money the government was spending over here and stretch it further and potentially give people better benefits at a lower cost. And this has evolved over the years. Medicare Advantage is an extremely viable option for our consumers today, but it does come with some things that clients need to understand. First of all, when you go with the Medicare Advantage plan, you do have a network of doctors and hospitals. And there are two types of plans out there. There are what are called HMOs and PPOs. Most of us understand that, but just quickly, an HMO is going to be a more restrictive network of doctors and hospitals with no coverage out of network unless it's an emergency situation. A PPO plan is typically going to be a broader network of doctors and hospitals with you get a better deal if you go in network, but you can still go out of network and just have a little bit higher copays or a little bit higher cost sharing. So it's more, I refer to it as managed care. The insurance company is the one managing your care. And with that, comes some potential issues that consumers sometimes don't like. Sometimes people say, well, I don't want, why does my doctor says I need this, but I need to get it pre-authorized by the insurance company? Yep. If you're in a Medicare Advantage plan, you do, just like your group insurance through your last employer, right? This particular path is going to be much more, sorry, did not mean to do that, is going to be much more in alignment with like traditional group insurance through an employer platform because it's managed care. It's the insurance company, and they're managing the care to reduce cost and to enhance outcomes. And there is a lot of studies out there that show that managed care, where an insurance company is involved and asking questions and saying, why are we trying to do 3 MRIs in the same day? Or why are we doing a spinal fusion when we could try cortisone or physical therapy first? Those types of things oftentimes do lead to better outcomes. There's pros and cons in this particular path. I will say that, typically when you go with a Medicare Advantage plan, what they're doing is they're wrapping your medical coverage and your prescription drug coverage together into one package, like Sandra mentioned. Um, it is a little bit different in how the coverage actually works too. Many of these Medicare Advantage plans are $0 a month right now, which that's a significant premium savings off of $200 a month for a Medicare supplement, maybe a little bit of money for a prescription drug plan. So, you start looking at the delta between the two from a cost perspective, immediately out of the gate, you're probably going to be around $200 a month difference in premium. Well, if you're over here, that's $2,400 a year that you're putting back in your pocket. And I could easily argue that you can pay a lot of copays with $2,400 in premium savings and still end up ahead at the end of the year, right? Medicare Advantage plans also do work differently. Remember, I told you over here on the Medicare supplement plan that you have a $283 deductible and 100% coverage after that? If you go with the Medicare Advantage plan, there are no large deductibles that have to be met. But how these plans are structured is you have small fixed copays that you pay for each little event as it happens. And then those copays stack up on top of each other towards some sort of an out-of-pocket maximum. And I would say most of the plans today have out-of-pocket maximums between $4,000 and $9,000, depending on which carrier and which plan you choose. Now, the chances of hitting that out-of-pocket maximum are slim. Statistically speaking, less than 5% of the people on a Medicare Advantage plan actually hit their out-of-pocket maximum. And that's because, to hit your out-of-pocket maximum, one big event's not going to get you there because that's going to be capped with a small fixed copay. It would be a lot of events stacking up over the course of a calendar year that might get you, to that 5, 6, 7, 8, $9,000 out-of-pocket maximum on the plan. Sandra, go ahead.
Yeah, in regards to the max out of pocket on some plans, the cost of prescriptions may not go towards the maximum out of pocket. They may have their own limit for prescription coverage. So again, devil's in the details on the plans. So just be aware of that.
I will say, no matter which of these two paths you go down, when you go into Medicare, you have two separate buckets of risk. You've got your medical bucket of risk, and separate from that, you have your outpatient drug bucket of risk. We'll get into this a little bit more, but if you think about going down this first path and you buy a Medicare Supplement Plan G, your worst case scenario on medical is $283, which is that deductible that you have to pay, and then it's 100% coverage. The out-of-pocket maximum on all drug plans for 2026 is $2,100. So you could have the potential of $283 and then $2,100. If you look at a Medicare Advantage plan, again, you have two buckets of risk. You have the potential out of pocket of the medical, which could be 4 to 9,000 depending on which plan you choose. Plus, you still have that same $2,100 out of pocket risk, potential risk on the drug side of things. So those are things to understand because obviously those are gaps and holes that oftentimes need to be filled with supplemental insurance. And that's where, I would say the one place where I've seen clients hit their out of pocket maximum on the medical and the prescriptions in a single year is a cancer diagnosis.
Yep.
And oftentimes when they're doing that, they're hitting that out-of-pocket maximum several, if not multiple years in a row. So that's where a 20, 30, $40,000 cancer policy can really, insulate them from that potential risk.
Yeah. So one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about supplements, Silas, is the premiums. Premiums are based on the age and gender and where somebody lives in a demographic area. Some areas might be higher than other, but just know Plan G benefits, for example, are Plan G benefits, no matter what insurance company you go with. The difference is the companies are setting the rates. So you may see a Plan G for a lower premium with this company A, but same Plan G benefits might be this rate for their Plan G. So again, they've got actuaries, they're looking at their pool of people. So please know that with the Medicare supplement side, the benefits are all the same no matter what insurance company you go with.
I will say, it's not always a good methodology to just take the lowest Plan G either, because to me, it's a matter of that starting rate, but it's also a matter of what kind of rate increases has that carrier historically seen.
Exactly.
Some of the companies who have the lowest entry level rates have the highest rate increases, and so within a couple of years, they're far higher than what they would have been on a different product.
Yeah, we've actually seen companies where they'll get you in at a low rate, and then 6 months later, that person is incurring a rate increase. So it's kind of crazy. So
I will say, and just generically speaking, I really feel, and I tell my clients this, I feel like aligning you with a large national carrier is going to be able to spread your risk further and create more rate stability over time. I have a lot of my Medicare supplement clients with United Healthcare, Humana, Aetna. Historically, if we were to look back, United Healthcare has had some of the most stable rates, but they're not the cheapest to get started either. So you got to kind of understand that and talk your clients through that as well.
yeah.
There are also some other kind of creative things that have come out on the Medicare supplement side of the business. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but there is a Medicare supplement Plan G, which is very popular. I would say probably the second most popular Medicare supplement is a Plan N. A Plan N is similar to a G. It's going to be a little bit less expensive. It has the same $283 deductible on medical, and then it has a copay for every doctor's visit and a copay for every emergency room visit. If a consumer is willing to take on that additional risk, they can hit a little bit lower price point.
Yeah.
I'll say
Those
the thing
copays don't go towards meeting the 283 medical deductible though.
correct. The copays are separate. The one thing I don't like about a Plan N is that I cannot tell a consumer what their out-of-pocket maximum is going to be. It's just going to be based on how many times they use it. There's no true out-of-pocket maximum on it. So I would say that's one that you'll see out there in the market, and you may run into clients that actually have. The other one that I think is becoming more popular is what's called a high deductible Plan G. And this is kind of a unique concept. It basically gives you more copays and cost sharing on things with a $2,900 out of pocket maximum in a bad year, which 2,900 is pretty good. And you can hit some much lower price points with that. So Humana has a high deductible Plan G. Physicians Mutual has a high deductible Plan G. They also have what they call an innovative high deductible Plan G. And it's kind of an interesting concept where a consumer can come in and have a high deductible plan G for the first 3 years, and then it turns into a regular plan G with a $283 deductible. So I'm not doing product training today on that stuff, but I would
No,
say plan G, plan N, or high deductible plan G are probably the three most popular. I don't think I've ever sold a Medicare supplement plan that wasn't one of those three products. And I'd say the majority of what I'm selling today is still a plan G. That's where
me
most
too.
of them
And
are.
then the only time they can review their Medicare supplement plan any time of year. There's but in Indiana, we just passed the Indiana birthday rule, which allows them to review another, say, Plan G if they already have Plan G. They're already on a Plan G. They have the opportunity to switch to a different Plan G without having to answer any health questions. Outside of the birthday rule and in other states, they can again review their options for enrolling in a different plan G, but now there's medical questions to answer. They will look at your height and weight and medical history, and it is very possible to be declined. So if you are going down that path, you never cancel their current policy until you absolutely know the new one has been approved.
I will say this birthday rule is a brand new thing in the state of Indiana. I think 7 other states have done this now. I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's my take on this is it's legislators thinking that they're helping consumers by saying even if you're sick, you can change plans within 60 days of your birthday and the insurance company has to accept you. On the surface, that sounds like we're doing a service to consumers. But what they're not looking at, like most legislators, is what are the ripple effects of this? The unfortunate reality is that we are going to see, and we've already seen, pretty significant rate increases. And it's being exacerbated by the fact that sick people can move to a new plan, and the insurance companies have to account for that bad risk that they're forced to assume. In other states where the birthday rule has been implemented, we've seen massive rate increases, and we've even seen some insurance companies just pull out of those states and not offer coverage anymore because they can't they can't manage the risk that's coming in. They have to take anybody who chooses to change plans within 60 days of their birthday. So a lot's to be determined. We're only 6 or 7 months into that in the state of Indiana, but I do feel like that's one of the reasons why we're seeing 18 to 24% rate increases on these Medicare supplement plans because the insurance companies are recognizing we're having to take on a lot of bad risk at a very low rate, and so they're raising rates more significantly for everyone.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
um, yeah. So
Yep. And then I did put in the, I'm sorry, Silas, I forgot to mention, I did put in the chat a link to the Understanding Medicare Advantage plans from CMS. So there's a link to that document as well in the chat.
So what I tell my clients with this is I don't care which path you travel down. For many years, my clients were a 50-50 split. We have shifted more now. I'm probably 70% Medicare Advantage, 30% original Medicare, not because people don't like original Medicare, but simply because of the rate increases that they've seen and they've had to do something different at the next open enrollment season. As people come into this, it's also important to understand that when they come into Medicare for the first time, they can pretty much pick whatever they want without any pre-existing conditions. Like they could be riddled with cancer, have had 10 heart attacks, and be on a bunch of expensive medications. And then when they're enrolling in their Medicare Part B for the first time, that triggers an initial election period where they can pick anything they want and get it with no medical questions. Once people have been in Medicare for over a year, it becomes a little bit harder to move around. And I'll explain how this works. So if somebody comes into original Medicare with a Medicare supplement plan, at any given open enrollment period or annual enrollment period at the end of the year, they can move into a Medicare Advantage plan with no medical underwriting, no medical questions. If someone's in a Medicare Advantage plan, every year they can switch their Medicare Advantage plan to a different Medicare Advantage plan with no medical underwriting. What's difficult to do is to come into a Medicare Advantage plan, be on it for more than 12 months, get sick, and say, okay, now I want to buy up into a Medicare supplement plan. I really like that idea. I've been diagnosed with cancer. I really like that idea of a $283 deductible and 100% coverage. A consumer's not going to be able to make that move because no insurance company will insure them at that point, and they don't have to. So, and I tell people this is nothing more than a common insurance reality. And that reality is it's hard to buy more insurance after you need it, right? And that's not unique to Medicare. I mean, it's homeowners, auto, life insurance. Can't buy more auto insurance after you wreck your car. Can't buy more homeowners insurance after your house burns down. Can't buy more life insurance on your spouse after they're dead. Like that's just like common reality. And I always like to say it that way because that like resonates with people like, oh, okay. So I tell people when you come into Medicare, you need to pick and choose something that you're comfortable with when you're healthy, but I also want you to be comfortable with it when you're sick, right? Excuse me, I needed to clear my throat there. So these are kind of the two paths. I will say as you begin to understand how to cross sell into things, I do think as you're having this conversation, you should be weaving supplemental insurance and ancillary products into the conversation. One of the things that Kevin McIntyre says right out of the gate is if you do choose a Medicare Advantage plan, we never recommend a Medicare Advantage plan without an Advantage Guard. And that's kind of setting the stage for the fact that it might not be zero, it might be 70 or $80 a month to have an Advantage Guard and an accident and a cancer policy, bundled in with that Medicare Advantage plan. Um, I think if you go with original Medicare, you probably don't need an Advantage Guard, but you probably do need an accident wise and a cancer policy to go alongside that, to help offset, the prescription drug costs and all the indirect costs that come with a major illness or a major accident,
And dental and vision.
and dental and vision on this side. That is worth mentioning that when you go with the Medicare Advantage plan, most Medicare Advantage plans include some level of vision, dental, hearing. Um, they have over-the-counter drugs, gym memberships included with them, some bells and whistles that are nice to have.
I know
Jake,
we're
I
going to
see
be
you raised your
talking.
hand instead of putting something into the chat box. So what can I answer a question for you, Jake?
Yeah, just a quick question about the accident-wise and cancer plans. Are those similar to that with like life insurance, where there has to be a 48-hour gap from when you sign them up for Medicare for when you can actually enroll them in those plans?
It's a great question, and the answer is no. As long as the consumer has initialed the spot on the scope of appointment form that says you can talk about ancillary products.
I don't think
Okay,
we.
We'll talk about that scope of appointment form a little bit more later, but there's a scope of appointment form that is required. The government requires that we have it on file every time we talk to a Medicare beneficiary. Historically, they had to sign that form at least 48 hours before the appointment. And I tell my clients the reason for this form is the government is trying to protect you from me talking to you about things you don't want to talk about. If you want to talk about everything, just initial every box on there, and that gives us permission to talk about everything. So I try to get them to initial every box so we can talk about every single thing on there. But as long as they've initialed that ancillary box on there, you can talk about the supplemental insurance, and that's uniquely different from talking about life insurance in that same setting.
got it. Thank you.
Good question. So again, I don't think we should be pushing clients one direction or the other. I think we should be educating them and helping them make an informed decision. And oftentimes when I go through this with people, at the end, I'm like, are you leaning one direction or another? And they're like, oh yeah, I think we're going to go with a Medicare supplement with prescription drug plan. We can afford it. And if we got to switch to a later day, we're okay, great. A lot of other people are like, I don't really want to pay an extra $200 a month per person. I think, that Medicare Advantage plan sounds like that, like even better than what I had through work because I don't have a big deductible. I only have small fixed copays. I like the vision, dental, hearing, gym memberships, over the counter drugs. Like I'm comfortable going with that. And I'm comfortable knowing that I can't use Mayo with that. Like I have to go somewhere else for a center of excellence. So a lot of it is just educating and making sure that the client understands what path they're actually traveling down.
And this is why fact finding is so important.
Yep.
Yeah. We do have a question in the chat, Silas. How have you, I'm sorry, have you ever sold an Advantage plan with a Part D plan?
No. So the only time that you can do that, if you remember from your AHIP, is if you're selling a specific kind of Medicare Advantage plan that's called a private fee for service or PFFS, which I don't even think we have any PFFSs anymore in our area.
Not in our,
I've never
and I
sold
don't
one.
think there are any in the Michigan area either.
Yeah, I don't. I'm only selling I'm mostly selling PPOs, sometimes HMOs, but
Mhm.
mostly PPOs. So I don't sell PFFS, and you can't legally sell a standalone prescription drug plan with an HMO or a PPO that includes drug coverage. You also can't, there are some plans out there specifically for veterans we'll talk about that are called MA only plans. So it's a Medicare Advantage plan without drug coverage. It's a good solution for somebody who's a veteran and has access to the VA for their drug coverage. But even in that situation, you can't sell an MA only and then a standalone Part D prescription drug plan. The government doesn't allow those two to exist together. Does that answer that question?
And we'll be going over Part D in general, actually next week. So,
Right.
there's a I think this is Alan. Can you make recommendation for products for those between age 60 and 65 that they can keep after 65 and will be an excellent choice?
Yeah, so I would say obviously cancer insurance,
Mm-hmm.
life insurance, accident
Yeah.
wise,
Any of your
hospital confinement.
ancillary. Yeah.
Yeah, any of those
Um,
ancillary products.
and we haven't really talked about the enrollment periods, but on either side of the
We
equation
will.
here, it's important to review their coverage on an annual basis from the Medicare Advantage side as well as the prescription drug plan side.
Right. And I tell clients, I think a lot of this decision tree boils down to how you buy insurance. What I mean by that is that first path, original Medicare with a supplement and Part D prescription drug plan, may be better for folks who wish to pay a higher premium, but have less out-of-pocket expenses claims are incurred. I view that as a little bit more risk adverse position. You have that person who says, I'd rather just pay a bunch of money to the insurance company so when something happens, I have little to no out-of-pocket expense. That's one way of purchasing insurance. Generally, Medicare Advantage plans are better suited for individuals who want to pay less money to the insurance company, but are willing to pay copays and have more out-of-pocket expenses as claims are incurred with some sort of a cap or an out-of-pocket maximum. So again, I don't think one's right or wrong, good or bad. I just think it's a matter of how people actually buy insurance. We talked a little bit about this. What if I have pre-existing conditions? So Part A and Part B are both issued regardless of past or existing health issues. Both Medicare Advantage and Medicare Supplement plans have enrollment periods where beneficiaries can gain access to coverage on a guaranteed issue basis. And then there are also corresponding enrollment periods for Part D or prescription drug coverage. I will tell you the only time that somebody would run into pre-existing condition issues and getting coverage is if they turn 65 and said, I'm just going to run without coverage, or I'm only going to take Part A and Part B for a season, whether it's months or years. And then at a later date, they're trying to get enrolled in something. That could cause problems. The government has some regulations in force where they really push people to buy insurance when they're eligible and not to go more than 63 days without creditable coverage after they turn age 65. If somebody goes for more than 63 days without creditable coverage after age 65, they start incurring several late enrollment penalties that are assessed once they sign up for coverage. And those late enrollment penalties then stick with them for the rest of their life. So it is important, and I don't deal with that very often. Most people understand that they need to have coverage, right? But if somebody just said they were going to run without, that could cause some problems.
Mm-hmm.
When could it make sense to not move fully into Medicare and stay on a group insurance plan? Occasionally, I'll see situations like that. So maybe if the employee has a younger spouse who needs coverage, so I'm turning 65, my wife's 62, I could go to Medicare even though I'm continuing to work, but maybe I choose to stay on the group insurance to keep her covered on the group insurance if she's not working. Obviously, we could look at individual ACA options for that spouse in that situation, but a lot of it boils down to what is the cost of the group insurance and what are the benefits there versus what would the cost and the benefits be under Medicare. And I will tell you, I have multiple conversations a week analyzing that for consumers. And it just depends on their situation. It's never cut and dried. I met with somebody last week and she said, well, we're on our husband's group insurance. I'm turning 65 next year. She said, we actually don't pay anything for his insurance. It has a $3,000 out of pocket maximum, though, and they put $1,500 a year into our HSA account. I'm like, well, I wouldn't switch to Medicare if I were you. I mean, you're getting free insurance from the employer, the $3,000 out of pocket maximum, and then they're putting $1,500 into your HSA. So you've actually got an effective out of pocket maximum of $1,500. Like if you were to go into Medicare, it's going to cost you a bare minimum of $200 a month to go into Medicare. And that just doesn't make sense, I don't think. I said I'd stay on that group insurance until it changes or until your husband decides he wants to retire and go into Medicare, and then we'd have to help you both at that point.
And then if you
So
have a husband like mine, he failed retirement. So he was on Medicare for a brief moment, and then I voluntarily disenrolled him because our insurance is fabulous. So, and I'm under 65 still, just barely, but still. So it's like, yeah, so there are situations like that.
another scenario might be the group plan offering is significantly better. So I've seen situations, there's a local municipality where they've got some old timers, retirees on a program, and it has a $16 or a $600 deductible and out-of-pocket maximum for medical and drugs. And it's just like, it's very expensive, but it's such awesome coverage. I've talked to several people from that organization every year, and I'm like, oh, I think you should stay put because even though you've got really high drug costs and it's covered so well there. And then obviously other special circumstances like ESRD. The next question I pose is, can I take advantage of Medicare even if I continue to work past 65? And the answer is yes. Once you turn 65, you're eligible to leave the group coverage and enter Medicare at any time. And I say anytime, the first day of any month out ahead of you, right? And then I really promote here that everybody's situation is different, and you need to talk to somebody like us who knows what the heck they're talking about to be able to evaluate and analyze this for you. I would encourage you as agents, do that analysis and be brutally honest with the client. I have gained so much business from telling people, I don't think you should buy insurance from me right now because you've got something awesome there. That goes a long way towards building trust and referrals over time, right? So do what's right by the client. What about veterans? Um, I always like to ask if I'm in a group setting, are there any veterans in the room? And if there are, they raise their hand, and I always pause for a moment and thank them for their service. I think that's one thing. If you're dealing with a veteran, whether it's in a group setting or an individual setting, make sure to thank them for their service because many of those, especially some of the guys in, overseas wars, they experience some horrific things. And I'm always want to take that moment, right, to honor them. But I will say, if somebody is a veteran, we need to think about this a little bit differently because oftentimes veterans do have access to the VA, Veterans Administration, TRICARE, or CHAMPS VA, and may have additional coverage and benefits available to them. And in many situations, they don't even know that that exists or that they're eligible for it. So if someone is a veteran and I'm working with them, I encourage them to contact the local VA office to find out more about what they're entitled to if they've never done that. Here in Elkhart County, so every county has a VA liaison that they assign, and you can look them up online. All their contact information is there. The one here in Elkhart County is James Snowden is his name, and I bet dozens, if not hundreds, of veterans to him just to find out if they're eligible for anything. Some of them have found out they're not eligible for much, but some of them, like guys who served on the ground in Vietnam and were exposed to Agent Orange, like they're it's an unbelievable amount of benefits that they're eligible for, and they never even knew it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if they have like diabetes and health issues that could be tied back to that Agent Orange. Sometimes the VA will just pay for all of that for them, or pay for
Yeah, they're
all of their medications, or there's all kinds of crazy benefits available. So I really try to act as, a connector. I connect them to that VA person and tell them, call them, schedule an appointment, go in and see what you're eligible for, and then come back to me. I
Yeah, I
will
had a
say
client.
that.
I was going to say I have a client that was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and we found out he served and was exposed to Agent Orange, but he didn't have his veterans benefits in place. And I immediately referred them, and it's like what a night and day. He's got a lot of extra benefits. I had no idea. So
A lot of these
just
veterans are prideful individuals and
yeah,
they may not have needed VA benefits. And they're like, hey, there's a lot of veterans who need it way more than me. I've heard that a dozen times. Um, and that may be true. But a lot of these people, like later in life, they do need the benefits. And so they can engage at a later date too. So I would also say that if someone has VA benefits, a lot of the insurance carriers offer special Medicare Advantage plans that are specifically built for veterans. So not only do and many times those are MA only plans, so Medicare Advantage only plans that do not include prescription drug coverage because they know they can get their drugs through the VA, and so it covers their medical. I think it's a great. Many of those are $0. They have Part B givebacks. They got a lot of crazy extra benefits on them. I think they can be really, really smart, option for people who are veterans. So as part of your fact finding, you always want to make sure that you understand if someone is a veteran or has served so that we can, properly navigate that for them. So a few things that I wanted to touch on from a change perspective. So several years ago, the Biden administration passed what was called the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. And one of the big things in that legislation was that it put a cap on a consumer's prescription out-of-pocket costs on an annual basis. Before 2025, there was no cap on a consumer's out-of-pocket drug cost. The way that those drug plans worked 2024 and before is that the drug plan would typically cover 95% of the cost of the drugs, which seems like pretty good coverage. But when a consumer owes 5% and it's 5% of a big number, it can be a big number. I had a number of clients who have been on oral chemotherapy drugs, and they run $18,000 to $23,000 a month. Well, pre 2025, when they owed 5%, I had clients who their 5% was 8, 10, 12, $14,000 a year, was just the 5% that they owed. So this particular legislation basically said we're going to eliminate that 5% coinsurance and we're going to put a cap of $2,000 in 2025 and $2,100 in 2026 on out-of-pocket drug costs. Overall, this helped a lot of people who are on really expensive medications. So I see value in it. But part of this process is obviously shifting that cost from the consumer back to the insurance company. And this is where we have legitimate concerns about the average drug plan cost and what it's going to do in the coming years. We talked about those Medicare supplement plans having crazy rate increases, 18 to 24%. I could see the drug plans, the standalone drug plans that you have to purchase with a Medicare supplement, also having crazy rate increases. There's banter and talk out there in the industry that within a couple of years, the average drug plan is going to be $150 a month just for the drug plan because of some of these changes. I
And
don't
the
know if
number
it's anything.
and the number of plans available is decreasing.
Correct. And many of those standalone drug plans, most of them, the insurance companies have stopped paying commissions on to agents. We still help guide consumers on it. We still enroll them, but we don't get paid for it anymore. So there is some volatility going on in that space. And I think it's going to further exacerbate the problem of rate increases on the original Medicare side. If their Medicare supplements going up 18 to 24%, and they're seeing a 30 or 40% increase in the prescription drug plan costs year over year, that could price people out of that very, very quickly. And obviously their fallback position is then going to a Medicare Advantage plan, oftentimes with some supplemental insurance. I will tell you, it's also something when you think about it, when you're taking a client who's paying three, four, $500 a month for their Medicare supplement plan, and you're moving them to a Medicare Advantage plan, there's a massive opportunity to cross sell in that, right? They're used to spending three, four, $500 a month. They're going to zero. Why not spend 100, $120 a month to backfill some of the exposure that you have on the Medicare Advantage plan and put you in a better position? I would also say that a Medicare Advantage plan with supplemental insurance wrapped around it is going to be a much more rate stable product over time than a Medicare supplement with a standalone prescription drug plan, right? We know that those supplemental products stay very rate stable. And historically, the Medicare Advantage plans, many of them have been zero forever. I would expect that to change over time a little bit, but I don't think we're going to be seeing 18 to 24% rate increases. And even if we do, it's on a much smaller dollar amount, so it's not going to be as painful, right? So that's just something to kind of think about as well. So I said here that we expect that this increased cost is being pushed to the insurance carriers will cause carriers to raise their premiums on standalone RX plans and Medicare Advantage plans that include RX coverage. There's also increased pressure on Medicare supplement policies that may cause premiums to rise at a faster rate, as we've kind of talked about. So as we're kind of in the home stretch here, a few final things I just want to mention. This is a slide that I've used for many, many years, both in the under 65 and the over 65 space, because I do think it's very important for clients to understand that any base underlying medical product that they purchase is flawed and it has gaps and holes in it. These are the two statistics that I've really hung my hat on for many years. And honestly, what I tell my clients is these statistics haunt me the most as an insurance advisor. The first one is that illness and medical bills contributed to more than 62% of all bankruptcies. My stated goal with the clients that I serve is to help them avoid medical bankruptcy. Well, to avoid it, we have to understand what's causing it. What's in that blue box is probably the most profound statistic that I've seen in the 25 years I've been in this business. Because what it says is out of the people who actually file for medical bankruptcy, almost 78% of them had an underlying medical product in place. Question becomes, what the hell is going on here? Like people are buying insurance to prevent ending up in medical bankruptcy. Yet almost 80% of the people who file for medical bankruptcy had an underlying medical plan in place. I think what that does is it shines a glaring spotlight on the reality that there are gaps and holes in any underlying plan. Health insurance and or Medicare benefits are designed to compensate or pay the in-network doctors and hospitals for medically necessary FDA-approved treatments. Many of these plans, though, whether it's under 65 or over 65, have increasing deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums that have to be met. In the under 65 space, we're going to like a $12,000 out-of-pocket maximum for most consumers next year per person with a maximum of two for a family. Many of these Medicare Advantage plans, like I said, have five to $9,000 out-of-pocket maximums, plus another $2,100 of potential drug costs in a bad year. You also have all of the indirect costs associated with a major illness or a major accident. And I think that's probably the biggest culprit here. Things like travel for care, experimental treatments, drugs that aren't on the formulary list, out-of-network providers. I talk about the adult diapers that somebody needs while they're going through chemo. It's kind of a jarring thing to think about, right? And all the dental work that has to be done in the back end of that chemo because all the enamel's been rotted off their teeth. These are very real expenses that insurance does not cover. I'll tell you a quick example. So I live on a lake in Middlebury, Indiana, and my old neighbor, we moved across the lake 7 years ago. My old neighbor, though, have been longtime clients of mine, husband and wife. She's had some heart issues. In January, she had some heart issues and ended up getting transported over to Cleveland Clinic. She spent 6 months in Cleveland Clinic, and she's been in rehab therapy now, in and out of the hospital a few times. Um, I was actually on a little boat ride with my wife the other night, and he was out fishing, and we went past him, and I've been keeping in touch with him. And he said, he kind of yelled at me across the lake. He's like, "You're never going to believe what her total bill is right now." I said, "Well, do you know?" And he said, "Yep, 4.5 million." And it's the biggest like claim I've ever seen a client go through. I've never had anybody. I mean, I've had a couple million, 2 million, but I don't think I've ever had anybody who's had 4.5 million. She's on a United Healthcare Medicare Advantage plan with a $3,700 out-of-pocket maximum. They maxed out their 3,700 and they've had no other bills since then. So he's just like eternally grateful for that. However, she was at the Cleveland Clinic for 6 months. So what did he do? He rented an Airbnb by the Cleveland Clinic. He negotiated a pretty good deal on it, but he had all of that expense. He had the back and forth. They own a home here. He was trying to get back here. Finally had to start paying somebody to take care of the lawn because he was over there so much. Just managing and maintaining the home, while they're away. Now that she's gotten out of there, there's been some snafus with the skilled nursing, and I've been warning him that you've got a maximum of 100 days if she's making progress. And so he's looking, he's like, we're coming up on, 100 days is going to blow by pretty quick. And he told me, he said, I'm already rearranging, monies and assets to begin paying for this. Fortunately, I was able to prep him a little bit for it, but they don't have long-term care insurance. And if she ends up being in there more than 100 days, he's going to start having to pick up the bill on this. These are all the things, though, that drive medical bankruptcy, and they're very real. They happen all the time. And I think we're absolutely not fulfilling our fiduciary responsibility if we don't talk about these things and have these conversations with the clients that we serve, whether it's under 65 or over 65. So in Medicare, I think there's a couple of things that are really prominent drivers of these indirect costs. The first one is cancer and specialty drugs. The next one is home health care or long-term care. This is a great slide that talks about the statistics around cancer. It's the second leading cause of death. 78% of all cancers are diagnosed in people 55 years and older. We're quickly approaching the rate that 1 in 2 Americans will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lifetime. And so I'm a huge proponent of cancer insurance to pay out to our clients. Just over the last couple of years, I've had just north of $1 million of cancer insurance pay out to my clients. And these are the biggest one was 100,000. A lot of them are 20, 30, 40, $50,000 cash payouts. And I've just seen in real time what a blessing it can be to drop 20, 30, 40, $50,000 cash in somebody's lap when they're diagnosed with cancer. Obviously, it hits different people in different ways, right? Somebody who's low income, low resource, doesn't have an emergency fund. This can create an emergency fund in the moment for them to use on whatever they need. I also have very high income, high net worth clients that see value in this because they get a lump sum tax free cash infusion, and that money can be used for any purpose without having to dip into other resources and create taxable consequences accessing cash elsewhere. So I don't care what financial position someone is in. I always talk about cancer insurance and suggest it and recommend it. Obviously, the way that we sell our cancer insurance, there are lump sum benefits or payments that can be used to pay deductibles, living expenses, mortgage, rent, utility bills, whatever you need it for is what it can actually be used for. I had a client in here Friday afternoon. He's going through a second round of cancer. Part of the second round of cancer treatments, they wanted to do genetic testing to see if the work they were going to be doing was actually going to be impactful. We're looking at about $18,000 or $19,000 of genetic testing that the doctor did before getting pre-authorization from the insurance company, and Medicare denied it. Said we're not covering genetic testing. The beautiful thing about it is the first round of cancer that he had several years ago, I had a $70,000 cancer policy in force on him. So he got a $70,000 cash payout several years ago. And as we talked about this, they were very concerned about owing $18,000 for genetic testing. But I brought them back to the fact, I'm like, did you save some of that $70,000 that you got paid a couple of years ago? And there was like a light bulb went off. And they're like, yeah, actually we did. We put a huge chunk of that into savings. Like, okay, that's what it's for. Like, that's why I built this because there are going to be indirect costs that you have to use some of this money for. You can't just hoard it in your checking account or bank account, right? So that was just a much better conversation for me to be able to have with them, as opposed to them being upset with me or the insurance company or Medicare for not paying a genetic testing bill. We've created a situation where they can do that. I'll tell you one other situation. So I had a client in Florida. This was 2 years ago. Never smoked a day in her life. They retired, met with me. We helped them with health insurance, and they ended up purchasing a $100,000 cancer policy. Last summer, she called and she said, or he called, and he said, hey, my wife went in for a routine checkup. They saw something on her lung. They did a scan. She's been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And we're on a marketplace plan, unsubsidized. They weren't qualifying for subsidies with a narrow network of providers. Her doctor told them, we think you should go to the Mayo Clinic down here in Florida. Unfortunately, Mayo was not in network. I reminded them of the cancer policy. We triggered the policy, got them a $100,000 lump sum tax-free cash infusion, and they used that $100,000 then to go get the treatment that she needed at Mayo. So there's a lot of wonderful ways that cancer insurance can show up. The other last thought I'll say on this is that many of these plans that we're talking about have out-of-pocket maximums of eight, nine, 10, $12,000, whether it's under 65 or over 65. And when somebody is diagnosed with cancer, many times that cancer diagnosis is not confined to a single calendar year. If you're diagnosed with cancer right now, you're going to go deductible and out of pocket. And then January 1st, you're going to re-ante again. And then if you're still battling cancer in January of 2028, you're going to re-ante again. I've had multiple clients now who have maxed out their deductibles and out of pockets 3, 4, 5, 6 years in a row as they're battling cancer. What a blessing to be able to drop a bucket of cash in their lap and help them mitigate that risk. That's a very real risk. So I would just encourage you, if you're not talking to every client about cancer insurance, you should be. If you don't have your own stories, use mine. Home health care is another piece of this that I think we need to be having conversations about. I typically bring this up in my Medicare appointment. I don't try to address it then because to me, it's a whole nother conversation. So I'll typically schedule another appointment if they want to talk about home health care, long-term care, nursing home, assisted living, like what that looks like, because we do have some pretty incredible products. And then obviously life insurance for anything that we're talking about is typically a very natural progression of the conversation. And I think it's something we need to be talking about and asking about. So this is the presentation that I oftentimes use for employers. I thought it was a good foundational starting point to go through things with all of you. I hope you found value in this today. I do think one of the biggest takeaways that I hope you take from this is that you will not sell 100% of the products you don't present or talk about. I think the first big step is not like trying to build a pitch to sell somebody or convince somebody they need it. It's just taking the time to tell them where their gaps and holes are and then make recommendations around products that could fill those gaps and holes. And I told my clients at the very beginning, that's my job. It's not just to sell you insurance. It's to help you understand where your gaps and your holes and your risk are, and then make recommendations around that. You can do what you want with that information, but I can sleep well at night knowing that I've had the conversation and that you're not uncovered because of me. If you're uncovered, it's your choice, And I think that really resonates with clients that I serve. So, wow, I'm laying in the plane almost perfectly today.
Yeah,
So thank you for your help today, Sandra.
you're
Before we
welcome.
wrap things up today, are there other questions or things that you guys would like to just unmute and ask about? Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. How does she do that?
I don't know. There's something on the Zoom that allows us to do that. I see it every
Yeah.
once in a while. I don't know how you do it. So,
Okay. We went through a lot of information. So welcome to Medicare.
oh, Madeline figured it out too.
Oh.
So, well, hey, I appreciate y'all being here. I do have a 12 o'clock interview that I've got to jump into. So, just back to back.
And I
back
have
off a little
office
bit.
hours. Also join us next week, next Wednesday, at 1:00 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to go over more detailed information about the Part D prescription coverage, as well as how Medicare works with other types of coverage. So stay tuned to that. Hope you can join us. And again, I have open office hours today at 2 p.m. So I sent that link out I don't know if everybody got it or not, but you can also email me if you need some assistance.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for your help today, Sandra. Thank you all for being here. I hope you crush Medicare. We'll do our best to educate you over the next couple of weeks. So if you're not done with your AHIP and you're doing Medicare, you need to get that done ASAP. Our goal was 9/1 to have that done. So work on that if you're not done with it yet. All right, everybody, take care. I hope you have a great rest of the week. See ya.
Bye.